Okay, all right, now go. Okay. But yeah, by the coolest kid on the block, that's possibly me. But here we go. So this is the table of contents here. I'm just gonna give a brief introduction on why I chose the topic and who I want to benefit, and then we're gonna look at the standards of education, aka the NEPF, and then some relevant ADHD deficits that I'm going to compare with the standards, and then we'll see the efficacy gaps for all the other researchers that have tried to contribute to the topic, and then the bridge, which is my own research, and what I think we can do to possibly help with ADHD education. And then I'm gonna do a demonstration, so that'll be cool. Alrighty guys, so introduction on purpose. So when I chose this topic, I think we talked a lot about like systemic education changes and I always hear about interventions after the fact, after the bad education, and then all this other stuff. So I just wanted to see what it's like to, to have good education the first time around. So, there's a discrepancy in inclusive education and academic outcomes, but yeah, we'll talk about that later. So my purpose was just to highlight the standards and hopefully benefit the both students and educators. So we'll move on right over here. So here are the standards, the NEPF. So what is the NEPF, you ask? The Nevada Educator Performance Framework, and shout out to Gracie. But yeah, there's 5 standards here for Nevada education, and you don't have to memorize all this, we'll just go through it briefly. The number 1, new learning connectivity, high cognitive demand task, student meaning making, metacognitive engagement, integrated assessment. So out of those 5, we only really need to know 2 for this presentation, which is new learning connectivity, which just means the things that you learned prior to the time of your education, you're connecting it to what you're learning in that moment. And then metacognitive engagement just means that the student themselves are responsible for their learning and they understand why they're learning it. But as you can kind of see, there might be some incompatibilities with ADHD if you already know a few things, but that's not all, guys. That's not all. These are just the teacher education assessments, but there's actually assessments for students, the social emotional learning standards, and we have the self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision making, and I'm pretty sure I struggle with all of those. And for ADHD, I'm specifically looking at self-management and self-awareness. So in an ideal situation, the systemic promise is everyone is engaged and self-regulated. That usually doesn't happen, guys. That usually doesn't happen, but that's okay. So here are the relevant deficits of ADHD, and according to Mr. Alvarez and Gokora, I think that's how you pronounce it, the low working memory for ADHD, which just means it's really hard for them to keep a bunch of information and manipulate it in that moment. Rapid shifts in attention, just boop, 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 boop. And then internal fast-pacedness, kind of like how I'm going right now. And metacognitive gap, which is the executive deficits that they have, where it's kind of hard to monitor and stay on task. And a lot of students that do have ADHD rely on teachers, peers, and their parents to keep them in task. So if we compare these to the standards that I showed you guys, as you can see, the low working memory, how are you supposed to connect things if you don't even have the capacity in that moment to even know what you learned prior and all this stuff? How are you supposed, and standard 4, how are you supposed to do all this, be responsible if, one of the core incompatibilities of ADHD is monitoring your own consciousness and keeping yourself on track. But yeah, we'll shift to the efficacy gap. So right now, a lot of researchers have done some interventions to possibly help ADHD and academic outcomes. And from Eddy et al., they've used CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, to help ADHD kids to get their brain a little more organized and teach them like self-monitoring tasks and all that stuff. But as you can see here, that works medically and outside of academics, but those skills don't translate to the academic classroom, guys. And then for the second one is the standard disconnect. So there's a lot of research things that I saw was like people use gaming, VR, and computers, tablets to help people with ADHD, but it's mostly just to normalize the students rather than capitalize on their deficits, deficits. So here's my research here. According to Theobald, So, the meta-analysis suggests self-regulated learning significantly improves performance and motivation. And one of the most interesting things is social connection acts as a multiplier, which kind of makes sense. And if we look previously, being able to, ADHD students being able to have responsibility of their learning, is they usually base it off of teachers, peers, and their parents, like I said before. But my main research article was by, I don't know how to pronounce this, Leblanc, 2025. But yeah, examining the effectiveness of inclusive teaching practices for students with ADHD in post-secondary education. One size does fit all. And I think there's one really important quote here that really summed up everything, and it said, "Inclusive education is quality education." Ooh. Ooh, is Shakespeare really dead, guys? Is he really dead? My goodness. If you really think about it, those times where you're like out of the loop and all this stuff, but you have a professor or teacher that brings you really immersed and is really connected to you, knows your name, first name basis, all this stuff. So it doesn't even matter sometimes where if you're like daydreaming and all that, because sometimes a professor will just bring you and immerse you into the lecture, regardless if you like it or not sometimes. So, yeah. So in this article, they actually have the top 15 most effective inclusive teaching thingies right here. So there's like uses humor, interested in students in class, provides numerous examples, and all this stuff. So if I were an educator, I would probably just choose like 3 or 4 of these that cater to my own strengths, and then probably capitalize on those. So it's demonstration time, guys. So instead of finding the ADHD brain, capitalize on the fast pacedness. So I'm gonna try my best to use humor and enthusiasm. So I'm gonna kind of hide a little bit.
You can turn off the...
Oh, I'm just gonna put it right. Okay, guys. So the first part of the demonstration, I need you guys to stare at this dot for about 30 seconds, and I need your full cooperation. And I'll let you guys know when to stop. Alrighty, guys? Alrighty, guys, you can stop now. Oh, wow. So, now that you guys are done focusing and all this stuff, how to stop procrastination. Wow. By the realest to ever live. So here's the preface. The hippocampus got us good. And if you don't remember what the hippocampus does, that's the point. Anyways, but the hippocampus is where we store a lot of our memory. So you know all those times where we have these tough times, you're like, I know what I need to do, but I just can't do it. That's because all of that information is stored in the hippocampus. So in this presentation, what I'm going to attempt to do is bring all that knowledge from the hippocampus to the frontal lobes, where all the action and everything is really oriented from. So, here we go, guys. So, like I said, the real problem isn't knowing what to do, but the actual doing itself. And surprisingly, we've all done it before. Babies do it. Because, what is it? We don't go to a baby going, gravity, the terminal velocity to understand gravity, things like pulling from the core of the earth and gravitational pulls. What do babies actually do? They throw stuff. They spill milk. They do all these nonsense thingies. So, here we go. Being deviants? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh, no. Learning gravity. So, here's the table of contents. I'm just going to show you 2 flavors of procrastination: working memory, common questions, and a quick summary. So, we'll go ahead and move on with that. So, the first flavor of procrastination is emotional avoidance. And that just means you're procrastinating because you're avoiding negative emotions. So, an example would be if you had a presentation due yesterday and you really don't want to do it because you might screw it up or something. So, you just don't do it altogether. But consequence B is the presentation does well. But I guess in this example, I'm like, hey, what up, shoddy? What up, shoddy? So the consequence A right here is me getting rejected. I want to avoid getting rejected because that makes me feel insecure and sad. So I don't even say what's up, shoddy. So I don't even do it in the first place. So although procrastination happens when the feeling of desperation starts overcoming the negative feelings. Once that 1 hour is left before the deadline, it's time to lock in, guys. So we're gonna analyze a little bit about last minute panic. And we're gonna see what really controls your actions. And what really controls your actions when you do have negative feelings is your emotional circuits are the only thing that makes you do action. And this makes it so that neural pathway is efficient and strong. But rejection, you're always fearing rejection, so you'll never do it. However, the thing is, there's a lot of neural pathways that you can use to do some action. Maybe you're devoted to the cause or something. Maybe you just want to do it just because it's cool. Maybe someone just tells you, just do it for 20 bucks. So, there's two things you can do here. One of them is regulate your emotions, because if you really think about it, in order to stop this pathway from causing action, we gotta lower the negative emotions, right? And that's why alcohol is called liquid courage, because all those emotional circuits are all the way down, and you don't even care about the end outcome, right? So if you can maybe take a breather or do whatever nonsense like that, but I guarantee you won't have the privilege to regulate your emotions. So we'll move on to 2, suffer. So a lot of times we avoid things because we don't like negative feelings, but in order for us to level up and get stronger, we have to actually get in the ring with our emotions and do things despite how we feel. Like that. So the second flavor of procrastination, operational fuzziness. That's when your brain doesn't even know where to go from A to Z. So usually the first thing you want to do is be like, so be it. If you're really struggling and you can't chunk it out, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what do I need to learn to get started? And usually that helps out very much. So one important principle is there's the distraction, procrastinating, and task. And a lot of us, we tend to do the distraction part. However, when you're procrastinating, one of the best things to do is to procrastinate effectively. So that means maybe doing cleaning, doing your chores, maybe folding your clothes, anything that'll make you feel lighter and easier the next time you're attempting to do the task. So it's time for a break, guys, because that's a lot of information. So I'm just gonna take a seat here. Alrighty, guys, so we're gonna move on to working memory here. So working memory, I'm gonna go ahead and write on the board. But if you see here, like I said before, it's the brain's ability to hold and manipulate information in that moment. And as you can see, the first step is give up. Beautiful. Second, next, and negotiate. So I actually got my own marker here, guys. So if I can shift your attention to this board, we'll just be like phone, games, and eating, sure. And then we'll put this in a box. And then we'll do study, I'll do a resume, and call mom. Yep. And then this is you right here. Sad. So this is a working memory, essentially, visually. What tends to happen is you can only do so much, you can only think of so many things all at once. So in this example, it's a 3v3, but if you have ADHD, like I said previously, low working memory, you could probably only do 1v1s or 2v2s, you can't do like 3v3s. So essentially that's working memory. However, the problem with procrastination is we're so focused on this battle, this phone versus study, these games versus resume, that the best thing to do is just give up. Give up on this battle, because what happens when you have this working memory is you get tunnel vision. Tunnel vision because you don't even know about the infinite possibilities. You can clean dishes. You can help out your siblings. So essentially, like I said, the first step is give up on this. Don't give it any of your cognitive space. And like I said, then number 2 is find the next best thing, clean dishes and help siblings. And number 3, even if all those don't work out, we have to negotiate. And if you have experience with children, you know this very well. Because let's say you're like, hello little one, you gotta eat your broccoli. And then you're like, no, I don't wanna eat broccoli. And then I'm like, dang, you gotta eat your carrots. They're like, no, I don't wanna eat carrots. And then you're just like, fine, what do you wanna eat? They're like, gummy bears, yippee. And you're like, no, how about applesauce? And then they're like, fine, applesauce. That's a very large simplification. I'm pretty sure it lasts way longer than that. But moving on, here's some common questions. How do I start reading a 500-page book? It's overwhelming. Well, the first thing you gotta do is forget about pages 2 to 500. Regardless of if it's a 200-page book, 500-page book, or a 1,000-page book, the way to start is the same. Start on page 1 and keep going. What if it feels bad if I leave a bunch of projects unfinished? Well, it feels bad, but you never know. All these unfinished projects will usually lead to future opportunities that you don't even know about. And third question, how about when you finish 0 projects? Well, if you think about it, guys, every finished project starts off as an unfinished project. So all you gotta do is just finish it. Alrighty. So here's a summary and conclusion. What to do next time. So this is bringing all that information from the hippocampus to the frontal lobe. So next time you're procrastinating, recognize you're procrastinating and which flavor. Second is give up. Beautiful. And the third thing is do the next best thing, then find the middle ground and negotiate. And here's some long-term things. Emotional regulation, lose all your emotional battles, that's already happening, and then level up. And then if you still can't procrastinate productively, so it'll be an easier action to do tomorrow. And that's it, guys, that's it.